Hello and welcome to the Candidate on Election Exchange. We're in conversation with Milind Deora, a member of the current government, as he takes a shot at winning the South Mumbai constituency for the third time. Milind Deora, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV 18. This is going to be the third time that you're actually going to be contesting. You won the last two times. But is this a different election, Milind? Because this time around, you're not just dealing with issues of anti-incumbency, but you're also dealing with a very strong anti-Congress sentiment. Are you feeling a difference this time around as you go on the campaign trail?
Well, you know, Shireen, this is, like you said, my third election, and I remember my first election, in fact, in 2004 when BJP was in power. Vajpayee ji was Prime Minister of India, and the BJP was running the India Shining campaign, and there was a sense, at least amongst the market community, the financial community, certain sections of society, that BJP is going to come to power and that they're the only party that can provide stability, growth, economic growth and other things. And just a month and a half or 2 months later, not only did I win, but Congress came to power and we got 145 seats and BJP.
So are you saying this election is like 2004? Are you saying this election is like 2004, that the markets are misreading the mood of the nation and perhaps the Congress is going to do better than what people imagined it to do?
Well, I think look at the last few elections. 2004, as I said, we weren't expected to win, we won. 2009, we weren't expected to win or get the number of seats we got, and we got 207 seats. We increased our tally by over 50 seats. So I frankly believe, in the beginning, when I started my political career, I took opinion polls and this sentiment and these waves quite seriously. But I've learned in the last 10 years to ignore them and to debunk the myths associated with them. And I think ultimately it's almost arrogant for any political party, politician, even a pollster to really predict elections. I think India is too diverse and too heterogeneous a country to really predict what an outcome is going to be. Forget about India. I find it tough to even poll a place like South Mumbai.
I'll grant you that. Forget about what the opinion polls are suggesting, but let's just look at the fact on the ground, and the reality is that as far as the last assembly elections were concerned, the Congress was routed. The Congress was routed in traditional Congress strongholds like Delhi and Rajasthan. That says something. That speaks for something.
Well, again, I come back to 2004, and if you remember in the 2003 elections in the same four states, in Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Delhi, we were in power in all four states and we only managed to retain one, and we lost all three very badly, in fact, in 2003, but yet in 2004 we came to power in the center. So people vote differently on state elections, people vote differently for central and parliamentary elections. I'm not saying that there isn't any anti-incumbency. I understand that we've been in power for 10 years. We've been in power in the center for 10 years. In Maharashtra, we've been in power for a few years. So of course there's bound to be anti-incumbency, but is that anti-incumbency a wave in favor of the opposition party? I don't believe that, because I think that it also depends a lot on the local candidate. It also depends on the local dynamics in the constituency. So for example, in my constituency in South Mumbai, my main battle is against my opponent from MNS, for instance, who's an MLA in my area, who came second in the last elections.
You don't believe Meera
ultimately,
Sanyal
I believe that people will understand that they don't want to waste their votes.
So you're saying it's a battle between you and the candidate from the MNS. You're completely discounting Meera Sanyal?
No, I'm not discounting anyone. I didn't discount Meera Sanyal in 2009, even though she got, I think, 10,000 votes, and as compared to my 270,000 votes.
But she was fighting as an independent. She was fighting as an independent. This time around, she has the Arvind Kejriwal brand of politics and the Aam Aadmi Party tag. Perhaps that would ensure a better result or a better performance for her. Don't you believe that the Aam Aadmi Party has struck a chord with voters? We've seen Arvind Kejriwal campaign in Mumbai. He drew huge crowds. He's currently in Varanasi. You don't think the Aam Aadmi Party could play spoiler?
Well, look, what the Aam Aadmi Party can do and how strong their local candidates are, that's a separate issue. I think Aam Aadmi Party, in my opinion, is frankly a regional Delhi party, and that's something that we're going to see on the 16th of May. if they want to spread to other areas and how well they move beyond Delhi, maybe to Haryana and to Maharashtra and to Bangalore and other places, will ultimately depend on the strength, the network and the work of the candidate. So in that sense, I have to prioritize as a candidate. I don't take any opponent lightly. There are almost 20 people who fight from South Mumbai every time. South Mumbai is a prestigious constituency. People fight not to win an election, many times just to be an ex-candidate of South Mumbai. But I take every opponent very, very seriously, whether they're fighting as independents, whether they're fighting from a small, new, mainstream party, whatever it is. But ultimately, in every battle, one has to strategize and prioritize. So for me, obviously my priority will be to prioritize, that MNS and Shiv Sena are my main candidates.
You were talking about how you've always spoken out about issues that concern voters, not just in your constituency, but also on a national level. And hence, a lot of people have alluded to the fact that, in a sense, you're Rahul Gandhi's ears and eyes. I know you've disputed that tooth and nail, but nevertheless, let me ask you, because you have commented also that the party in power needs to use young leaders and their talent. Do you believe that the Congress party has failed to use the young leaders and talent? Let's start with Mr. Rahul Gandhi himself. He hasn't been in government. There was a lot of talk about whether he would be part of the government or not. His attempt to try and reach out, to try and hit the campaign trail, some would say is too little too late. The public outbursts that we've seen as far as the ordinance, etc. were concerned have pretty much gone down as sort of immature from a political standpoint. Do you believe the Congress has failed to tap the power of the youth, and hence Narendra Modi has been able to connect much better with the youth?
Look, firstly, let me answer your first point about Milind Deora being Rahul Gandhi's weather vane. Nothing is further from the truth, number one. I know him. I've known him before we got into politics, but he's never involved me politically in various assignments. So I don't have a working professional relationship that people think I do with him, number one. Should we have done better in terms of involving the youth? I think, look, I've said this in the past also, that when we came back to power in 2009, I wish Rahul Gandhi got into government. I wish he got into government and worked with Dr. Manmohan Singh. I thought it would have been a very good, healthy combination of youth and experience, of wisdom, a lot of grey hairs and a lot of young blood also. That didn't happen, and there's no point going back to the past and sort of looking at it in hindsight and saying I wish we did that. But I do believe that Congress has given a lot of younger leaders a lot of important responsibilities. When I look at some of the ministers and my colleagues out there in the government, look at Sachin Pilot. He's the Minister of Corporate Affairs, which is a very critical ministry. Sachin, piloted the passage of the new companies bill in Parliament. Look at Jyotiraditya Scindia, who's an independent minister with independent charge of a very critical infrastructure ministry like power. I've been given the responsibility of IT, telecommunications and shipping recently. So
I agree with you there, Milind, but let me put the other point of view across to you. If this is a party that Rahul Gandhi wants to re-engineer, this is a party that Rahul Gandhi wants to restructure, he's been talking about changing the orientation and the DNA, then why is it that people that you named, Sachin Pilot gets put in charge of Rajasthan just before the elections, and Jyotiraditya Scindia is put in charge of Madhya Pradesh, when there is very little that he can actually do to turn the fortunes of the Congress party around? That is what doesn't reconcile. You hear what Rahul Gandhi says, but then you see a completely different reality on ground.
But look, Shireen, no one is saying that there isn't room for improvement. I'm not saying we're a perfect party and we're doing everything perfectly. Of course, there's a lot of room for improvement. There's a lot of scope for making the right kind of changes, both in the party and in government. And I think it's fair to conclude, and it's fair to say that we didn't communicate a lot of our strengths as effectively as we should have in the last 2 or 3 years especially. It's also fair to say we didn't communicate our weaknesses or the allegations thrown against us, because a lot of them might be frivolous, a lot of them might be grossly exaggerated. We didn't put those out there. So at one level I do think there was a communication failure, but I don't think it's entirely the party's blame or the government's blame in not communicating. We have to remember this is a new environment that's been created in India, where you have RTI, where you have 24/7 news channels who are competing for space, for business, and as a result, let's be honest, they can be sensational at times. You have social media, and we just happen to be the first government operating in that environment.
Let's be honest, can you really blame policy paralysis on the fact that you're now dealing with a new environment where there's social media and so on and so forth? I mean, let's just take a look at the most recent example, and that is the gas price decision, which has been deferred now by the insistence or the directive of the Election Commission. You set up a committee, the Rangarajan committee gave you its recommendations. The cabinet waited for 10 months before taking that decision, and after that the decision to notify it was also left till the Election Code of Conduct came into effect. So I'm just using one example to show that there has been policy paralysis, and you cannot blame it on social media or 24/7 news channels.
No, I'm not blaming it on anyone. I accept that taking decisions, look, I'm just saying that there's a new environment been created in our country. Pre-2005, Shireen, please remember, we didn't have RTI in our country. Every government that ran India for the last so many decades operated in a non-RTI regime, where any file that was signed by a minister wasn't available to the public for, it wasn't transparent. And post-2005, suddenly every decision of the government was open to the public. Suddenly people inferred maybe this was taken with the wrong intent, maybe there was corruption. Then of course you had media and you had social media. So I'm not saying that it's only the fault of the environment. I do believe that we as a party and a government should have seen that coming. I think in hindsight, because I was the MP who initiated the debate on RTI in 2005, May, and I think in hindsight, maybe we as a party and a government should have said, look, we're suddenly changing the relationship between government and the citizen, and it's going to lead to a lot of information going out into the hands of the public, into the hands of the media, social media. We're seeing internet growth, and maybe people will start using it objectively or subjectively, and maybe even frivolously. And maybe it's important that we create a cell in the INB ministry, in the government, to actually put out information, to counter wrong information. So I do believe it is largely our inability also to communicate as effectively as we should have. I'm not taking shirking away from that responsibility. I do think we could have done a much better job at communicating.
On that note, we're going to take a quick break, but when we return, we continue our conversation with Milind Deora on the candidate. Welcome back. You're watching The Candidate. We're in conversation with Congress MP Milind Deora. Milind, let me ask you this, since you touched upon the promises the BJP is making, especially as far as the economy is concerned. There seems to now be a realization, even within the Congress party, that the emphasis on this business of economics of entitlement, on scheme-based guarantees that the Congress has promised, has not necessarily worked. If I can quote the finance minister, not verbatim, but in conversations that we've had, there seems to be a realization that people want jobs, people want better opportunities, people want access to a better livelihood. They don't necessarily want another scheme, and the BJP is clearly highlighting what some would say is a shortcoming of the Congress's economic agenda. I know that the Congress is releasing its manifesto on the 26th. Are we likely to see a shift away from this business of guarantee or rights-based schemes to more job creation, better livelihood, access to finance, and so on and so forth, unleashing the entrepreneurial zeal of India, which in a sense got lost, especially in the last 5 years as far as the Congress's promises were concerned?
Yeah, look, if you ask me frankly, for my personal opinion, my personal opinion is that freebies don't work and freebies are unsustainable. And I think whether it's my government or it's someone else's government, or if you saw the most extreme stage, the most irresponsible extreme, which is the AAP government in Delhi, freebies are dangerous, and freebies ultimately fool the taxpayer and fool the public into believing that they're getting a subsidy when actually you're putting money in one pocket and taking money from the other, taking money out of the other pocket. That's my personal view.
So you acknowledge that the Congress
I think, to be fair to the government,
you acknowledge that the Congress's economic agenda, in that sense of promising freebies, has been the wrong choice.
No, I think there's a fundamental difference in the way we've gone about dealing with subsidies and these pro-poor schemes and welfare schemes. Look, let's compare what AAP did recently in Delhi. They said, if you are a protester who protested against paying your power bills, or you joined us in cutting the electricity lines, you will be rewarded with a rebate. We did a food security bill from a fundamental philosophical, ideological view that says India is a rich country, people shouldn't be starving, and people should have a right to get access to food. I think those are fundamental differences in, if you call them freebies or subsidies. But at the same time, to be fair to our government, we also we have the NSDC, which is the National Skills Development Council, which, don't forget,
Yeah.
Shireen, is allowing thousands and thousands of youth in our country. We have Mr. Ramodarai, who is the head of TCS, who is a skills advisor to the Prime Minister, which is enabling thousands of youth across the country, and I know that from my own constituency, who are not just getting jobs, but are getting trained to get jobs. They're getting certified with certain skills.
Yes,
there was
but
earlier no
you know
certification
the
if you're a
data.
plumber, if you want to be an electrician,
You know the
if you want to
data,
be a
Milind,
cameraman.
and
Today there are skills and certificates
I
being
don't want to
given for
get
people,
in,
which is
I don't
leading
want to get
immediate
into a
employability.
debate. I don't want to get into a debate on the data, and the data clearly shows that even as far as the time when we were growing at 8.5%, we were actually not creating jobs. So in a sense, the last decade has been a decade of jobless growth, and that could have been the charge leveled against the BJP as well when it was in power. But as I said, I don't want to get down to that debate. I'm asking you whether you believe that there should be, or there is likely to be, when the Congress unveils its manifesto, a shift in the Congress's economic approach. At this point in time, and I come to you from a space where people feel that the Congress has abdicated the Aam Aadmi space, which has now been taken up by the Aam Aadmi Party. It's taken away it's no longer in the pro-development space, which is a space that has been captured by the BJP, and the Congress is stuck somewhere in the middle. It doesn't know which way to go.
Now that's completely untrue. We are very clear in our economic objective of economic redistribution, of equitable growth. Please remember, Shireen, that in 2004 when we came to power, the paradigm in the country with regards to economics and economic growth was a very exclusive one. We tried to make it more exclusive, and in 10 years we have done a lot. We have reduced poverty, we have alleviated poverty by more than any government has ever done in the past. Of course there's a long way to go and there's much more to be done, but to say that to try and hint or allege that we are an irresponsible party, both fiscally, both in terms of subsidies, I think that's very untrue. Today, look at what's happening with Aadhaar and the direct benefits transfer. Maybe the Supreme Court has said that Aadhaar is not mandatory for the services. But please tell me if there is a better idea that any other political party has had to redirect and make subsidies more efficient. Ultimately, that's what we should be debating. It's very easy
since you raised the issue of subsidy and you raised specifically the issue of Aadhaar, let me ask you this, because this once again comes back to the issue of the Congress party not having backed ideas, not having taken ownership of the ideas that it put forward. Aadhaar being one example. 2010, you moved the bill to give constitutional validity to the Aadhaar program. It didn't go anywhere. The Supreme Court is questioning the very validity of the entire Aadhaar program. This was one of your flagship programs. Shouldn't the Congress party have prioritized this? This was your mechanism to address the issue of subsidies, and look where it is today. That is the point that I'm making, that forget policy paralysis, the UPA hasn't done enough to take ownership of its own flagship programs, the Aadhaar being one case in point.
No, I don't believe that's true again. I think, look, we should have passed the Aadhaar bill long back. I don't deny that. Ultimately, you need political will and consensus in Parliament, Shireen. It's not just about one political party. If people want to play politics and they don't want to restructure the way systems work in our country and to improve those systems, you're going to have a problem. Today, look at the Pension Fund Regulatory Authority bill. PFRDA bill had been languishing also for some time. Let me take you to an example in my own ministry. We are in the Ministry of Telecommunications and IT, and through the Department of Electronics and IT, running a very, very ambitious e-governance program. If you ask anyone today who has applied for a passport to get their passport renewed through the Passport Seva Kendra, people who are filing their income tax returns online, that's part of the Government of India and my ministry's e-governance initiative. It's not a perfect solution again, but it's a solution that's improving governance. It's a solution that's reducing corruption. It's a solution that's reducing the human interface between the citizen and government, making government smaller, smarter, more efficient. I don't know why we as a country aren't debating these issues. All we're debating, for example, even in the ambit of corruption, is either you're for a Lokpal bill or you're against a Lokpal bill. Most people won't even know what the Lokpal bill is about. So I think we as a country have, unfortunately, the narrative in our country, the political discourse in our country has been reduced to sound bites, rhetoric, and on social media to 140 character allegations even. And as a result, it's very easy for a party, whether it's an upstart party, whether it's a main opposition party, to just throw muck at those in government and just say everything's wrong and nothing's good. But when you try and improve things and you try and restructure things, people criticize that, and people aren't willing to change that. If you remember when I initiated the bill in 2005 on RTI, please remember this. I spoke to empty benches. There was not a single member from the entire NDA present in the Lok Sabha when the RTI bill was being debated in May 2005. When such a historic bill, which is completely restructured government, which is allowing government to be completely transparent, there was not a single person present from the opposition in parliament. Isn't that deplorable? Isn't that disgusting?
No,
that means
you make an
people want to play
point.
politics, people want to have rhetoric and choose rhetoric over actual substance, and that's unfortunately what's happening in our country. So let's try and change the debate to something more substantive, to really solution oriented, not just highlighting the problems.
We hope that that is exactly what will happen. But Milind, we're completely out of time. Let me ask you my final question. The Congress manifesto will be unveiled tomorrow. Give us a sense of what we can expect, or at least what you would like to see as far as the Congress's economic agenda is concerned. Your constituency is going to be watching out very, very closely. How do you intend to address, or how the Congress intends to address the issues of fiscal prudence, deficits, stabilizing the rupee, bringing growth back on track to 8% plus levels, attracting foreign institutional investors, attracting domestic capital back? What would we expect in the Congress manifesto? At least what would you like to see if you don't know what's in it?
Well, I think one very critical point that I would be hopeful for in the Congress manifesto, and frankly in the manifesto of every mainstream party that can possibly govern India, is, how do you balance the conflict between environment and development? I think that is very critical for us to debate, discuss, put out in our manifestos and provide clarity to investors. That's something which no party has really articulated very well, and that's something that keeps coming up and sort of stalling or slowing down large infrastructure projects in our country. I think the rest of the agenda is very clear, which is that I fundamentally believe that ultimately what determines economic growth in our country is political stability, and what really determines political stability is social acceptability in our country. And that is a fundamental difference between a Congress-led government and a Narendra Modi-led BJP government. The reason I believe, and I think that's something that should come out in our manifesto very clearly, that a Narendra Modi-led BJP government cannot provide the kind of political stability needed for economic growth in our country, is because someone like Narendra Modi lacks social acceptability in our country, and that there's a fundamental difference between a Modi-led NDA and a Vajpayee-led NDA.
Milind Deora, that is the litmus test for Narendra Modi, but time will tell and the voters will decide which way this is going to go. But appreciate you joining us here on The Candidate. We wish you very best of luck as you attempt a third shot at winning South Mumbai. Thanks very much for joining us on CNBC TV 18.